Silly season has begun in the NASCAR Cup Series as Martin Truex Jr. will return to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2023. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. has signed a multi-year contract extension with JTG-Daugherty Racing, and Junior Motorsports is potentially looking to jump up to the Cup Series at least on a part-time basis in 2023. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start off paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Berry's 2022 Chevy Military Appreciation Scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Road America. Honestly, I think his paint scheme looks really solid. Another really good looking scheme that Ryan Williams designed. Ryan Williams is a really awesome designer. This paint scheme is absolutely incredible. I think did an amazing job on it, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the racetrack this weekend at Road America. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace's 2022 PFG Columbia Salute scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Road America. This is one of my favorite Bubba Wallace schemes I've seen since he's joined 2311 Racing. It absolutely just shows America. It's an amazing looking paint scheme. They did an absolutely incredible and a very awesome job on it, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the racetrack here at Road America. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kyle Busch's 2022 Skittles Patriotta scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Road America. Honestly, I think this is better than the one he had at Coda. This looks really good. They did an awesome job on the color scheme. Skittles always brings really good Kyle Busch schemes. This one's no exception, and they did an awesome job on this paint scheme, in my honest opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chris Buescher's 2022 Fastenal Patriotta scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Road America. Not much to say other than fact, I think this paint scheme looks absolutely amazing. Fastenal's had a lot of good looking schemes this year, and I think this one's no exception. This one looks really great. I think they did an awesome job on it, and I'm absolutely looking forward to seeing the racetrack this weekend here at Road America. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Corey LaJoie's 2022 Built Bar Patriotta scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Road America. Honestly, I think this one also looks really good. I've been a big fan of the Patriotta schemes this year. This one is no exception. They did an amazing job on it. I think Spires had some good ones this year, and this one also, it's an exception. Looks amazing. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tyler Reddick's 2022 Three Cheese Salute scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Road America. Honestly, this looks awesome. I honestly would not mind this being the actual paint scheme if they run the black and the brown contrast that they have. I think works a lot better than the white and the brown contrast, and that's no disrespect, but I like this one a lot better than the other contrast. Honestly, regardless, it looks like an awesome paint scheme, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the racetrack here this weekend at Road America. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Jeff Gluck poll from this past weekend at Nashville. So after every single NASCAR Cup Series race, Jeff Gluck always does a poll. And according to him, 71.2% of people said yes to the poll. Now, he knows that this is the second lowest number of people that have voted on the poll so far, but over 70% of people, once again, voted yes. This is still a really solid number regardless, and I think a lot of it is for a couple reasons. One, I do basically believe that because of the fact we have multiple rain delays and a lightning delay in the race at one point, I think that's probably why the ratings, unfortunately, well, not ratings, but unfortunately, the Jeff Gluck poll is not as high. People are not big fans of delays, and it's a shame that the numbers can be up, but it's not a big surprise that that is the Jeff Gluck poll for this weekend. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle and Brexton Busch. As it was announced yesterday that Kyle and Brexton are going to compete in the inaugural Seabells Micromania event on September 21st to 24th at Little Texas Motor Speedway. I'm pretty sure Texas Motor Speedway is building a micro track under the track, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not entirely sure. They were doing some stuff yesterday at Texas Motor Speedway. But it's great to see that not only Kyle Busch is going to be competing in this, but also his son, Brexton Busch. Brexton Busch has been racing for the last couple years, and I have to say Brexton is really doing awesome racing. He's been winning feature races against a lot of these younger kids, and it's really great to see that Brexton is coming up through the ranks. And that Toyota really wants to have Brexton in their stable, which is why they're trying to get Kyle Busch in contract negotiations with Kyle Busch. But in all honesty, in all seriousness, I think it's amazing and awesome, and hopefully they will do really well in this event. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Paulette Karpov. As it was announced yesterday that Paulette Karpov has been sentenced to 11 years in prison. 11 years, 3 months to be exact. For a lot of you don't know, Paulette Karpov was part of the DC Solar Ponzi scheme, where they had $1 billion basically into the scheme, and it unfortunately failed for them. And they basically got raided about 3 or 4 years ago, and affected teams like Chip Ganassi Racing. Honestly, I've got no sympathy for people like this. I'm glad that she has been charged, along with everyone else has been involved, who's ever involved in the scheme. I'm glad they also end up getting charged when they do stuff like this, because in my opinion, it's unacceptable, and no one should be respected for something like this, because I think it is ridiculous, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are going to talk about Dale Jr. Now, we got multiple Dale Jr. stories we're going to be talking about in this video, but Dale Jr. is actually making 2 starts at North Wilkesboro later this year on August 30th and 31st. I believe he's going to be in the Cars Late Model Tour races. I believe the Cars Late Model Tour, I think he's going to be at North Wilkesboro, if I'm not mistaken, and he's going to enter in 2 of those races. Dale Jr. said he's wanted to enter 2 cars. It might be rumored that Josh Berry could be one of them, but also Carson Kvapil's been in the conversation as well as a massive potential to get into the ride as well. It's just awesome that Dale Jr. wants to go out there and race. I think it's amazing, and I'm happy to see that Dale Jr. is actually going to go out there and race in this event. I think it's amazing, and I'm very happy to see that Dale Jr. is going to enter some races at North Wilkesboro. I think it's awesome and amazing and great for the sport. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Toyota Sponsfire. Remember Toyota Sponsfire from back in the day from like 2010 and 2011? Well, the Toyota Sponsfire is officially going to be returning, and has basically commercials have been coming out left, right, center. You had a commercial for Denny Hamlin basically breaking a laptop, basically breaking electronics. You had Kyle Busch in an Alien commercial with Kurt Busch, and you've had one, I believe, with Antron Brown, I think, who drives for Toyota, if I'm not mistaken, in the funny cars. They are having a contest, and if you basically design the right paint scheme, which contest, by the way, goes through August 31st. I believe it starts, tomorrow. It was basically started already, but basically it goes through August 21st. If you win the contest, your car will be featured, whether it's a funny car or whether it's a regular Cup Series car. You basically will get featured on the car in the future. I think it's something that's awesome that they're doing, and I'm very excited to see that they brought Toyota Sponsfire back. I think it's such a cool thing that they brought that back, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Robert Wickens. Very awesome news around Robert Wickens, because Robert Wickens, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time since 2018, has won a race. He won the Michelin Pilot Challenge race at Watkins Glen, and like I mentioned, it's his first one since getting back behind the wheel of a race car after his horrendous crash in 2018. For a lot of you don't know, Robert Wickens has been on an incredible journey over the last few years. Robert Wickens, of course, who was involved in a very scary accident in Pocono in 2018, where he nearly lost his life. To see his comeback has just been tremendous, and to see him come back now and not only basically go out there and win, but just it be incredible, just race in the series again after what happened, I think is absolutely phenomenal and absolutely amazing. And it was such an emotional to see Robert Wickens go out there, win. Guys are working incredibly hard to get back into sport, and I think it's absolutely awesome that Robert Wickens is back in racing. So congratulations to Robert Wickens on winning, and massive congratulations to Mark Wilkins as well for winning the race as well. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Tyler Reddick. Now, Tyler Reddick was being talked to by SiriusXM NASCAR Radio about the heat issues inside the car after the race at Nashville. And Tyler Reddick says that the Cup cars was 20, maybe 30 degrees cooler than the Xfinity Series cars when they were at Nashville Super Speedway. Now, of course, a lot of people are going to say, well, how does Tyler Reddick know that? Well, Tyler Reddick, while he did race in the NASCAR Cup Series race, which he always does every single week, Tyler Reddick also competed in the 48 car for Big Machine Racing, so he knows a little bit more. That's a little bit more of a positive, considering there's been a lot of concerns about heat. Now, Kurt Busch did say after the race that when he was really exhausted, he basically did say that he really thinks that they need to work on the heat issues in these cars still. But I think Tyler Reddick probably disagrees a little bit. Maybe they could still work on the heat. But the fact that the Cup cars were 20 to 30 degrees cooler than the Xfinity Series cars, considering we had a lot of heat issues with the next-gen car initially, I think that at least is a positive in the right direction. And I'm glad to see that they've basically been working on that, trying to get the heat issues fixed. And hopefully, with whatever changes that Reddick has said and what people want, hopefully things can go forward when it comes to the heat issue, because the heat has been a massive problem. Hopefully those things do long-term continue to get improved, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kevin Meendering. As Kevin Meendering is going to be the crew chief for the 1700 Motorsports Xfinity Series car with the return. I believe this is already announced, if I'm not mistaken, but I wasn't entirely sure. Now, Kevin Meendry, who right now is crew chief for Kyle Larson for the next 3 races, with Cliff Daniels basically not being the crew chief right now, because again, he got suspended for 4 races. They're not planning to appeal the penalties that they got, so he's going to be out for the next few weeks. Honestly, I think Kevin Meendry will do solid. I think he did better in Xfinity than he did in Cup. I think he's a good crew chief, at least half the Xfinity Series. Now, the Cup Series is a much different story than the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but I'm glad to see at least he's getting an opportunity to kind of prove himself. So I think it will help Kevin Meendry be a little bit better on the crew chief box. So good to see he's back in the box, and hopefully he does really, really well. I'm not a big fan of him, but I understand why they're bringing him back for the Xfinity Series. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about some entry lists for this week. So, starting off, Joe Graf Jr. Joe Graf Jr. is going to drive the 5 for BJ McLeod Motorsports this weekend at Road America. Joe Graf Jr. generally drives the 07 car for the team, basically SS Greenlight Racing. He'll be jumping over to the 5 this weekend, basically to get some help in the points. Joe Graf Jr., of course, will also be driving a Ford, so that 5 car, once again, is going to be a Ford. Car looks amazing, by the way, but I don't know how Joe Graf Jr. is going to do this weekend. He's generally struggled on road courses throughout his career, so my expectations are not through the roof on Joe Graf Jr. Hope he does really, really well and gives that team an opportunity to have a strong run this weekend, because Ryan Preece had a pretty solid run at Nashville. Hope he does as good as Ryan Preece did in the ride. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Will Rogers. As Will Rogers is going to drive the 13 for MBM this weekend at Road America. Will Rogers has made a couple starts so far, I believe, this year up to this point in the Xfinity Series for Ram Brothers Racing, and now jumps over to 13. Now, 13 obviously is going to have to qualify into the race on time, but I think Will Rogers is capable enough to do it. Will Rogers is a really, really awesome road course racer. We all thought at one point maybe this year he was going to go full-time with Sam Hunt Racing. He's been wanting to go full-time in NASCAR once again. I think he's good enough to do it, and hopefully Will Rogers can have a solid run this weekend at Road America and make the show. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Chris Dyson. As Chris Dyson is going to drive the 35 for Emerling Gates Motorsports this weekend at Road America. Chris Dyson making his second career Xfinity Series start, and Chris Dyson not only known for winning some T2 championships, but also Chris Dyson has gone on once American Le Mans Championships races as well. So it's a good driver to bring on, a guy with a lot of road course experience, and I think that road course experience is going to come into play to helping out Chris Dyson have a strong run this weekend for Emerling Gates. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Preston Pardus. As Preston Pardus is going to drive the 91 for DGM Racing this weekend at Road America. This will be Preston Pardus' first start in quite a few races, and Preston Pardus, every time he's gotten behind the wheel of one of these cars, he's done extremely well on the road courses. He's known as a driver. He's had a lot of road course experience, which I think is going to come into play. And with weather potentially affecting the weekend maybe slightly for the Xfinity Series race, we might see it come into play for Preston. I think Preston's got a shot at top 10 DGM scenes when it comes to road course. The road course program, they tend to be really, really strong. I think he's got a good shot to have a good run this weekend. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ryan Vargas. As Ryan Vargas usually is in the 6 car for JD Motorsports, is actually going to be in the 47 once again for My Carmen Racing at Road America. This will be the second time that Ryan Vargas will be in the 47 car. This car, of course, will have to qualify his way in. Last time Ryan raced in his car, though, he was able to basically, I think, qualify in, but of course, he didn't have the extra entries. I'm a little nervous that Ryan, unfortunately, will probably end up missing the show because his car really is just not that fast. But I'm glad to see that Ryan is continuing to race and is racing full-time this season with the team. Hopefully, he does really, really good enough to make the show. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to do the other part of this, as Ty Dillon is going to drive the 6 for JD Motorsports this weekend at Road America. Ty Dillon, of course, currently drives the 42 for Petty GMS. I'm a little shocked he's driving for JD Motorsports. I would have thought maybe he would drive for like a team like Richard Childress Racing or another team would be available, but I'm kind of surprised he's going with JD Motorsports. But if he wins the race, it is what it is. I think Ty Dillon's had some decent stats on road courses, and his car isn't great in owner's points right now, but I'm very surprised he's not in a more competitive car. That being said, though, I hope Ty Dillon does have a good enough run to have a strong run this weekend, and good luck to him in the number 6 for JD Motorsports. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tyler Reddick. as Tyler Reddick for the second week in a row is going to be in the 48 for Big Machine Racing this weekend at Road America. Like I mentioned, Tyler Reddick has made 2 or 3 starts so far for Big Machine Racing. Picked up his first win with the team. Basically picked up their first win at Texas a couple weeks ago. Has really struggled ever since with the team. Really didn't have a good run at Nashville. But I think especially for a team that's known to be well on road courses, I think he's going to do well. Kind of shocked that Jay Buford's not on the ride, though, considering Jay Buford is generally a good road course racer. So I'm surprised he's not in the 48 car. But I think Reddick will be a contender to win. Reddick's a really good road course racer. And I think Reddick will be a good contender to potentially win this weekend at Road America. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Larice Hasemans. As Larice Hasemans is going to drive the 27 for Team Haysbers, and Team Haysbers is back this weekend at Road America. This will be the third time a Team Haysbers has entered the season. They entered earlier during the Daytona 500 with Jacques Villeneuve, and then they entered about 4 or 5 weeks into season Dakota. And we were wondering where Team Haysbers was going to come back. Here you go. I'm very excited to see that Team Haysbers is back because, again, everyone's going to make the show regardless. I think if they don't have any issues, which they did have some issues at Dakota, I think that they could have a really, really strong run. I hope they do because it'd be nice to see Larice Hasemans and the team have some solid runs this weekend. So good luck to the team, and hopefully Larice Hasemans can have a good run in the 2017, can have a good run this weekend at Road America. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about Team Penske as their LMDH program has been officially revealed for next year. And there's a lot of drivers to listen to everyone that I'm going to tell you. First team, Dane Cameron is going to be on the team. Then you're going to have Kevin Estra. Matt Campbell is going to be on the team. Then Matteo Giamenet will be on the team. Philippe Nasser is going to be on the team. Michael Christensen. Then you have Andre Lauderer and Lorenz Van Thor. This is a very prestigious lineup. Winners of Le Mans 24 Hours, winners of the 24 Hours Daytona, among other drivers who've won some massive, massive events, are going to be on this LMDH program. Now, some of these guys are racing the 24 Hours of Le Mans, while some of these guys are racing the 24 Hours Daytona. I would expect that Dane Cameron, Matteo Giamenet, Philippe Nasser, maybe Andre Lauderer are probably going to be the guys running the 24 Hours Daytona, and then probably Andre Lauderer, Lawrence Van Thor, Mike Crescent, and probably Matt Campbell will probably get behind the wheel. And of course, Kevin Estra will probably get behind the wheel at some point as well. A lot of these guys part of the factory program for the team. So overall, in my honest opinion, I think this is very, very exciting, and I'm glad to see that they're bringing this program back, and they're going back to LMDH. Glad to see a Porsche that's coming in and getting involved, and honestly, I'm very excited to see that we're going to see Team Penske in the top class once again for the first time in a couple of years. They haven't been in the series in a long time, and it's amazing that they're coming back. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Justin Marks. As we've talked about this, where Julio Castroneves has been talked about potentially making some Cup Series starts next year with a potential team. He's been promised Cup Series start in Daytona 500. Well, the plot has sunk in very, very recently as it was announced on Saturday for the SRX race startup that Justin Marks is going to substitute for Julio Castroneves at the SRX race at Stafford, as Julio Castroneves has a scheduling conflict that is coming up for this weekend. Overall, I think this really helps the plot thicken. But another thing I think it needs to be talked about is the fact that I think it's incredible to see that Justin Marks is getting behind the wheel. Justin Marks is a very, very passionate driver. He's had a lot of success as a race car driver, and I think that race car experience could really come and play a factor into Justin Marks having a really, really strong run in this car. I'm really excited to see what he can do this weekend. Hopefully, Justin Marks can contend with this car. It is a very equal car, but we know Justin Marks is better on road courses generally than he is on ovals when he races. But overall, in my opinion, I think it's very, very exciting, and I'm happy to see that we're going to have Justin Marks driving his car at Stafford. Hopefully, he has a really, really strong run here in the SRX race. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kurt Busch and Bubba Wallace. Now, Kurt Busch talked about some things around 2311 and talked about Bubba Wallace as well in recent interviews. And Kurt Busch says that the pit crew issues are a Joe Gibbs racing problem and that they're a supply chain issue. We'll start off with that for a minute. If you've been watching this year of Bubba Wallace, the 23 team especially has really struggled when it comes to being on pit road. You look at the performance of the team on pit road. They have lost some over 130 spots on pit road this year alone. And this season as well, they've had 7 loose wheels throughout the year, which is more than any other organization by far. Some teams have had 2, and some teams have had 3. He's had double of that, which is insane to me. And it's just unacceptable that this team has struggled as much as they had. They need a new picker on the team, and it seems like it's a supply issue for Bubba, because I think Bubba's a lot better than what he's been given right now. I think he's better than what he's been able to show. I think Bubba's a better driver than that. Also, you talk about mentoring Bubba Wallace. Said that he's kind of helping out, be there as a mentor for Bubba Wallace. And Kurt's the perfect guy. Kurt Busch, the guy that always got really extremely angry on the radio. So Kurt Busch, that I mentioned, is the perfect guy to come in and play and basically be that mentor for a guy like Bubba Wallace. I think Kurt's going to be there to help Bubba come through some of the issues that he's had. And I'm really excited to see that Kurt's coming in there helping out Bubba Wallace. And I think with Kurt being there, because Kurt's really calmed down over the years, I think Kurt will be a great person to bring in and help out a guy like Bubba. So I'm very excited to see that Kurt Busch is coming out there and helping Bubba Wallace. Bubba really needs that mentorship and guidance, I think, to be successful long term. And I'm excited to see that he's going to be a mentor for Bubba Wallace. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Scott Graves. As this should not surprise anybody, Scott Graves has been suspended for the next 4 races, along with a couple pit crew members. Scott Graves that means that Scott Graves will not be here at Road America. He will not be at Atlanta. He will not be, I believe, at New Hampshire, and then the race after, which I believe is Pocono. The reason is, once again, it should not surprise anybody, basically due to the lug nut issue. They had a tire come off after the race after coming off of pit road. If you lose a wheel, you get a 4-race suspension. But I've been saying this for a long time, that I personally believe that they need to get rid of. I think that there need to be penalties, no doubt about that. But I think it's getting to the point now where I think people really think that the penalties absolutely do need to be reduced from 4 races down, I think, maybe to 2 races, because 11 teams have been affected by it. It's not just them not getting the lug nuts tied. We're finding out more and more as time goes on that it's just more than that. So I hope that they can find a way to fix this issue before the season starts next year. I don't know if they're going to be able to fix these issues, but I really hope they can find a way to fix these problems when it comes to the tires, because these tire issues have been something that's been going on pretty much all year long, and it's just really, really frustrating to see so many teams affected by these tire issues. So I really hope and pray that they get this issue fixed for in the future, and hopefully going into next year they can fix this issue going forward. They really need to fix this, because this is a massive, massive problem, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kevin Harvick. Now, Kevin Harvick basically was interviewed by the media, and he talked about the fact that he took his son, Keelan, to Italy for a massive go-kart race. And basically the reason he took him over is to compete against some of the best drivers in the world and get Keelan a lot of experience. Keelan, of course, who has some ambitions to go to Formula 1. Kevin Harvick, though, said is not budging on letting Keelan go to Formula 1. The reason being is because there really isn't any places to get in there right now, which is the unfortunate, harsh reality right now with the world of Formula 1. So many drivers, these young kids, think that they can go to Formula 1, and it really doesn't work like that. You have to have a lot of experience. But what I love the fact is Kevin Harvick is taking his kid out there and racing, getting him some experience in the world of like go-karting. Keelan's been really solid in go-karting so far. We're seeing some of these younger drivers come in through the ranks, and another Keelan, I think, has somewhat of a contract with Kevin Harvick Incorporated. Makes a lot of sense, right? So I think it's cool that Kevin Harvick's taking his son over there to get some experience and some real-world experience. You should definitely go check the interview out to see more on that from Bob Pockers, but I think it's amazing that they are doing that, and I think it's incredible, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about wet weather tires. Now, we're going to be talking about the Goodyear tire test here in just a little bit, but during that Goodyear tire test, they actually tested wet weather tires. It was reported by Bob Pocker. He says that at the Goodyear tire test at Martinsville, the damp weather tires were tested for the session. Grip was good, but spray and visibility was an issue on the track. Now, for a lot of people who know, NASCAR has been trying to find a way basically to mitigate, at least on the shorter track side of things, for the shorter ovals, tracks like Phoenix and tracks like Martinsville, and I think Richmond would also come into play as well. These tracks will be able to have some rain if the track is damp. The reason they're testing this stuff is to get these guys a little bit of experience right there when it comes to that. Now, ultimately, they still have to find a way to fix the spray visibility, which I think if they can do that, because I think that they'll be able to fix this. NASCAR has been able to find ways to fix this, but we might be in the not too so distant future having some of these short track races race with a little bit of damp conditions and not going up the racetrack and potentially destroying their cars which I think overall is a genuine positive thing. If you save equipment, and because especially with short part shortages currently at the moment right now, I think overall, generally, I think that this is an exciting thing that they're looking at trying to fix this problem. Because it is an issue with if you have spray visibility, it's basically going to be impossible to see at the track. So generally, I think this is really, really awesome, really, really great, and I'm excited to for sure see the fact that they're trying this out. I think it's awesome, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Parker Kligerman versus Derek Kraus. Now, if you watch the NASCAR Camp World Truck Series race, you saw that Parker Kligerman almost went a lap down and finished outside the top 20. Well, there was a video that came out very, very recently that Derek Kraus, after the race, that Parker Kligerman actually confronted Derek Kraus. And Parker Kligerman was very unhappy with Derek Kraus and went up to him and confronted him because of this. Look, I think Derek Kraus is a talented driver. I've said this about him. I think he's talented. But Derek Kraus has made a lot of stupid mistakes this year in the Truck Series in the last couple years. He's way too over-aggressive, and he's gotten into drivers and cost drivers victories. And I can understand why a guy like Parker Kligerman, who has a lot of experience, is not going to play around with that. I understand Parker being really, really frustrated with that, and I completely understand. I think Parker's a really, really awesome driver, and it's a shame that Parker can't go full-time while you have guys like Derek Kraus going full-time and just wrecking people. I mean, he wrecked Carson Hocevar at Gateway, and basically one of the reasons why Carson is currently injured right now. So ultimately, I understand Parker's frustration, especially when you basically get taken out from basically third position, when you're basically got a shot at top 10. I don't blame him for being upset. These drivers got to chill out with the aggression. If they want to basically stay in the sport long term, the aggression definitely has to calm down in the series. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to calm down really ever long term. But it's something that definitely needs to happen. Hopefully, NASCAR maybe steps in. But honestly, the aggression is just over the line, in my opinion. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to continue on the side of aggression. We're going to talk about Matt DiBenedetto and his comments against Ty Majeski during the National Truck Series race. Now, Matty D was not very happy for one big reason and one big reason only. So, if you watch the NASCAR Camp World Truck Series race, you probably saw what happened between Matt DiBenedetto and Ty Majeski. Basically, they were battling, I think, 3 wide going to turn number 3 with around 23 or 22 laps to go. And Ty Majeski decides, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and send it 4 wide going into turn number 3. And it forces Matt DiBenedetto up the track and causes a massive incident that takes out 3 cars, including Matt DiBenedetto's having a really awesome race. Grant Enfinger was doing really good in the playoffs. And then, of course, Corey Heim was looking to try to get back up to the front and try to contend for the victory. Matty D went off and was very upset in the series. He wasn't just mad at Ty Majeski, though. He was mad at Carson Hocevar, and he says that these guys do not have a lot of respect. Whether you like Matt DiBenedetto or not, he's absolutely on point with this. And the aggression has just been ridiculous over the last couple of years. I think the series has really lost its mind. I remember when the series was a lot calmer back in the day. But really, ever since the pandemic ended, we got back from the pandemic, I feel like that's when the aggression really started picking up. And I thought at the beginning of the year, the aggression was calming down, but no, it hasn't. And I think guys like Matt DiBenedetto, who have a lot of Cup Series experience, who've been one of the cleaner drivers out there, it's not going to put up with it. I don't blame him if he basically starts wrecking these guys, because these guys are generally racing like clowns out there in the Truck Series. And it's very understandable if he decides to go out and wreck one of these drivers. I really would not blame him if he decides to go and wreck one of these drivers, because these guys are racing with their heads up their asses. They really, really are. And then they wonder why guys like Matt DiBenedetto are pissed off and frustrated. Because if you get raced like an idiot, I can't blame him for being upset. These guys need to chill out with the aggression. But honestly, I may just make these kids work on the cars. Make them work on the cars and pay for the cars and work on them. That's how you're going to stop these kids from racing like clowns and racing over your heads and way too aggressive. I think that's the only way you're going to unfortunately be able to stop this, and hopefully these teams can step in and start fixing the problems with their drivers. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Team Stange. Now, a lot of people wondering why Team Stange is not on the entry list for the NASCAR Cup Series race or any team. And the big reason is because they actually are pushing back their Cup debut to Watkins Glen, as their team is still working to try to get Tarso Marquet approved for the Cup Series. Now, Team Stage Racing was supposed to originally make 8 starts this year. Now it looks like their numbers of starts have been cut down to 6 for the season, and that's because they're having issues getting Taurus and Marquet approved. It's been rumored for a while this has been an issue and why they've not been on the entry list up this point. It's not because of a scam. Don't think it's because of a scam. Yes, I know it's a crypto sponsor, but it's not because of a scam. The reason is because the team is having issue getting a driver like Taurus and Marquet approved for the series. Now, ultimately, Team Stage Racing could be able, if they're approved sooner or later, they could enter the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Indianapolis, which is why they're pushing their debut back to Watkins Glen. It's definitely unfortunate Team Stage will not be on the grid this weekend. It would have been nice to see another car enter the field for this weekend. But overall, I'm not entirely surprised that they are having issues. Sometimes when it comes to getting approved these series, you're going to have issues when it comes getting through. So I'm glad at least that this has been cleared up, and hopefully we do find a way to get this issues resolved, and hopefully they're able to find a way to have this fixed, because honestly, I would love to see them come and race in the series. I think it would be great, and hopefully they're able to find a way to fix these issues. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Chase Elliott. Now, Chase Elliott, of course, picked up a second victory of the 2022 season and a second concrete win, nonetheless, this weekend at Nashville. But even though he actually liked the event, he says he still prefers the National Fairgrounds. He basically says he wants NASCAR still back at the National Fairgrounds. And he said he doesn't want to give a sour taste to the event, but he basically said that you're not going to be able to replicate a track inside an area. Because with this track, you're 30, 45 minutes away, almost an hour away from the racetrack itself. And he said that we should be getting closer to these markets and be inside the market, because technically we're almost outside the market. He absolutely has a very, very fair point. I think there is a way maybe they can coexist though with 2 races, but I'm not really entirely sure, especially with some attendance issues though. Attendance was not horrendous for this weekend at National Superspeedway. It was not great, but it was not overall really, really horrendous. It could have been a little bit better. It wasn't a sellout crowd this time around. There were some empty seats, but I will say generally it did look like still a really, really solid crowd regardless for the event. But I think Chase Elliott is absolutely on point. I think if you want to have a very, very successful event long term, you do have to bring the event to the people, and I think bringing it to the city. And I know that they're still trying to get negotiations done to make sure that this does happen, but they are having issues in the negotiation panel, of course. Right now, they don't even have a 5th person on the board right now for the National Fair Board, which is why this deal at this time has not gone through at this moment right now. But I agree with Chase Elliott wholly and entirely. I think if they're going to generally want to be successful long term, I think they absolutely need to get this racetrack back out there. And they can exist as National Superspeedway. It's very, very possible. But honestly, I do think it need to find an honest way to get back out there and get basically back to the National Fairgrounds. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about Josh Berry. Now, Josh Berry was being interviewed earlier, I believe last week, at Pat Nicola, who currently works for NASCAR.com. And Josh Berry has said that he has absolutely great ambitions to potentially jump up, and he really wants to jump up to the Cup Series. Now, Josh Berry has made 2 starts so far in his NASCAR Cup Series career. I believe one of them coming at Dover, the other one, I believe, coming later in the year. I think at maybe Dover, another track as well. I believe it was Michigan. I'm not entirely sure, but I know he made a couple starts last year in the Cup Series for Spire Motorsports. They weren't that spectacular, but to be frank, the cars, it was Spire Motorsports. What you're going to do, the 77 team, wasn't that fast, and he tried to finish in the top 30. I think Josh Berry's absolutely ready to make the jump up the Cup. He's been having a great year in the Xfinity Series so far. He has a couple Cup starts, not to mention that, and he has won 4 Xfinity Series races in his career. He's got 1 or 2 victories so far in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year alone, and has been extremely consistent when it comes to pace and speed. So I think Josh Berry absolutely be a perfect driver to be in the car. Honestly, I kind of hope that Josh Berry does get this opportunity to race in the Cup Series long term. We'll talk about where I think he potentially could go next year, because there's a team maybe looking to jump up the Cup Series, which will be in the later portion of this episode. But theoretically, I think it would be amazing if Josh did get the opportunity to race in the Cup Series. I think, yeah, really, really deserves the opportunity to make the jump up to the Cup Series. And theoretically, I really do hope that he gets the opportunity to jump up to the Cup Series long term. I think he deserves it, and I hope he does get the opportunity to jump up to the Cup Series. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Goodyear tire test from Martinsville. Now, for a lot of people who don't know and didn't remember, there was a test that was announced about a month or 2 ago. They were going to be having a test at Martinsville after a horrendous race at Martinsville. And for Martinsville standards, NASCAR said that they'd be testing at Martinsville. And they actually went through with the test and basically were trying to find a way to fix the issues with the cars. Now, there is a big organizational test that's going to be happening in the middle of August. So in about a month and a half from now, there's going to be another test that is going to be happening. But they were testing some things. And basically, they talk about they basically use a dirt underbody below in the car. Kyle Busch and Tyler, two of the drivers, are really outspoken about this. And Kyle Busch says that the aero changes basically work. But he says that there still needs to be more tire wear and more rubber laid down. Now, Tyler Reddick basically does say that changes help the handling of the car. And also mentions that they were laying more rubber down. Basically said that the tire wear was basically falling off because it wasn't the tire wear. It's basically because of the heat and not because of the other reason. I 100% agree with Kyle Busch, but I will say it's good to see at least the aero changes did help change the handling of the car because, again, they took the rear diffuser and basically used the underbody. They did not have the rear diffuser for the dirt configuration, and they did not have the dirt diffuser for this. I think the rear diffuser is playing a big factor in why it's been hard to pass, especially on some of these tracks. Don't get me wrong, we've seen some great racing this year, but I think especially on the shorter tracks as well, the rear diffuser has been an issue. For whatever reason, rear diffuser is not really working like it's supposed to. It's supposed to work one way, but apparently it's working the other way, which is definitely something that I think is really, really interesting. That being said, though, it's good to see the drivers were at that test. We'll probably talk about when we get to the organizational test later down the road, we'll probably talk about it. But I'm glad that NASCAR, and I appreciate the NASCAR stepping up. They said, you know what, we didn't like what we saw out there, so we're going to go and try to fix this. That shows the NASCAR is caring. They really want this car to succeed as much as anybody else does. So theoretically, I think it's good to see that they did go ahead and test this, and I think it's really, really good to see. So generally, I think testing makes a ton of sense, and good to see that basically they've gone ahead and tested the next-gen car issues. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the RXR Ratings from South Boston this past weekend. And for the second week in a row, they're not that great. So according to Adam Stern, CBS got a 0.58 rating and 982,000 viewers for Saturday night's RXR race at South Boston. That race is down about 400,000 viewers from last year's race and down by almost a 0.2% in rating when it comes to that. That is not good at all for the future of the SRX. But I will say there's a couple reasons why I think the ratings are down. Number one, I think the fact that there's been a lack of promotion with the series. You have to promote these series outside of CBS. You can't just promote your series inside. I think that's one reason why the ratings are down. The other reason I think is because it's basically second year. And generally the first year did really, really great, but I don't think the second year is doing well because, again, I think Ray Abraham not being there is a big factor into it. Don Hawk's running the group, and no disrespect to Don Hawk, but I don't think he's doing as good of a job as he can. I know Don's done great with SMI in the past, but I don't think he's doing as good a job as he can do. I think that's playing a major role and a contributing factor in the issues why the SRX is generally struggling with their ratings, and that's something they do absolutely got to fix going forward. It's just unfortunate to see that the lack of promotion and marketing. I think that if they don't start pulling a million ratings in the future, I think the series is going to die. I just think the series is potentially going to be gone in a few years, and it's disappointing because I think the race has been great, and I thought the race this weekend was fantastic. But man, the SRX race really, unfortunately, struggling in ratings. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as now we're going to jump into the National Cup Series TV ratings before the rain delays happen. So, according to Adam Stern, NBC was averaging a 1.81 rating and 2.921 million viewers for Sunday's NASCAR Cup Series race at Nashville before the first rain delay, which was of about 300,000 viewers from the race. But keep in mind that race was on NBCSN. Even with that, the fact that we didn't even see 3 million viewers on NBC really is not that great. You would think, especially for a big network event, you kind of want to have around 3 million viewers for your big event. But again, yeah, remember there were rain delays and stuff as well. And they bring this up that basically rain delays did play somewhat of a big factor into it. But the TV ratings are just not perfectly that great, to be honest. They need to be a little bit better, and honestly, and I do believe that we're going to see the ratings, unfortunately, decline over time. I think one thing that I'll give Fox credit for is the fact they have FS1, which is still very there, while USA Network, while yes, I think it still does have more consumers in their homes, I do think that basically will have less ratings. I mean, the Xfinity Series race got 300,000 less viewers on USA this year than it did on NBCSN last year, which I think is definitely really, really unfortunate to see. I think we'll see what happens long term. We do have more race NBC, especially near the end of the season. In fact, I think the final 6 races or the final 5 or 6 races this season are all going to be on major NBC networks. But unfortunately, we don't have another NASCAR Cup Series race on the network until July 31st, or 3 or 4 weeks before the next time, we do have a major event release for the Cup Series side of things on main NBC. Hopefully we'll see some good ratings maybe when we get those events, but generally I'm not expecting ratings to unfortunately be up for that, which I think is definitely unfortunate, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about F1 and ESPN. Now, there's a big F1 story I'm not going to be talking about in this video, but F1 ESPN, massive contract when it comes to TV negotiations. There's been a lot of talk about the future of the negotiations when it comes to what TV network is going to be. ESPN has agreed to renew its U.S. media rights deal with ESPN through the 2025 season. ESPN has agreed to pay around $75 to $90 million per year. They've also noted that maybe there's going to be some races on ESPN Plus, ESPN News or ESPN News Plus network or ESPN Plus. Not entirely sure. I think that's what the network is, if I'm not mistaken. Also, they have said at this point, more than likely, they're going to have the Sky Sports crew continue to commentate, which is a great thing. I'm very happy to see F1 is staying on ESPN, mainly because of the Sky Sports crew. Because of the fact that they're going to be paying a lot more money now, $75–90 million, which is still more of a take. But I think the reason that they paid so much more is because they're getting more of a massive return on investment. Ratings are increasing through the roof. We're seeing huge, major numbers for Formula 1. Formula 1 races are generally getting around 2 million viewers for U.S. numbers, especially on the main networks. They're getting 2 million, which is absolutely huge. And ESPN's had a contract with F1 for nearly 7 or 8 years. And I know that they're talking about trying to commercialize F1 a little bit, but it would be side-by-side commercials, and because of, I think, the fees. But I know that they're going to try to have commercial-free races going forward. I think this is a massive win. This is a huge deal for Formula 1 to keep ESPN on tabs. And maybe this could help NASCAR's future, because I know that NASCAR is trying to get in contact with ESPN. They want a contract with them. And that's around the same time that the contract would probably end for ESPN. But I know theoretically that this is just generally overall a massive and a great thing. And I am, again, very generally happy to see that we're going to see F1 to continue to be on ESPN going forward. I know this has been a big story going throughout the weeks, but I'm so happy to generally see that they are going to 100% continue being on ESPN long term. I think it makes a ton of sense, and I'm very happy to see if they are going to continue being on ESPN long term. Very exciting news for sure, to be honest with you. And jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Erik Jones. Now, Erik Jones was being interviewed by the media in regards to his contract talks around 2023 and returning to Petty GMS Motorsports. We know he said about 3 or 4 months ago that he said he was looking to already potentially return and once return to Petty GMS Motorsports. Now, we got a massive update here earlier this weekend. And he says that he feels like he is getting closer to getting a contract extension done to remain in the Petty GMS 43 for 2023. I'm very happy to hear this for many reasons, and I'll tell you why. Erik Jones has been really solid so far in the 2022 season. So solid, in fact, he's around 16th in the regular season points. Now, he currently says, I think, 19th or 20th in the points right now when it comes to the playoff standings. But Erik Jones has made the 43 car the most competitive it has been in ages. The last time the 43 car was this competitive was probably around 2013 or 2014 with Erik on the roller, or maybe in 2011, AJ Allmendinger. That's the last time I've seen the 43 car this competitive. This car has been almost a consistent top 10 base team. They've been consistently a top 15 team, but they've been showing a lot of top 10 speed. And I think it's not only the fact, and I think Petty GMS Racing has generally been a much better organization, but also I think a massive factor that I think is really helping Petty GMS Racing be a lot more successful is the fact that you got a talented driver. I think the car matters a lot, but we're seeing it more this year that these young talented drivers who've shown a lot of promise in the lower series, have been in the Cup Series long enough, who've been showing their stuff. And remember, Erik Jones was really solid with Joe Gibbs Racing. Got kicked out of that team. He's been driving for the team for a couple years now, and like I said, he's been extremely solid. I think he absolutely deserves a contract extension. I think he's done absolutely incredible and amazing, and I hope he gets extended for a long time and stays with the team. I know a lot of people want to see him go to the 10 car for Stu Ross Racing. I know a lot of you want to see that, and I would love to see him in the 10 car, but if he's happy driving a 43 car and wants to stay with the team, I can't blame a guy for wanting to stay with the organization. I think it makes a ton of sense for him to stay. He's made that team a lot more successful, and I'm very happy to see it looks like that Erik Jones is going to return to the 43 for Petty GMS in 2023. He deserves it. He's been really solid with the 43 team, and he's got some sponsorship funding with Focus Factor. And he's had a consistent team. He hasn't had a team he's been able to revolve around generally. I know it's a year-by-year basis when it comes to contracts, but Erik Jones deserves to return to Petty GMS in 2023, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the All-Star race. Now, this came out interestingly on basically Friday evening during the Truck Series race. So, according to Adam Stern, Fox wants to see the All-Star race move next year and rotate every year like the MLB All-Star Game. Is talking to the league about it per Bill Wagner, who is the Fox's executive vice president and one of the higher-ups at Fox Sports. Generally, I give a lot of L's to Fox Sports. This one is a massive, massive dub right here for a lot of reasons. I love that Fox is basically wanting to rotate the All-Star Game. I know the MLB basically said, well, that's ripping us off. Well, you guys basically had Fox take over, so there you go right there. But I'm absolutely for this as well, rotating the All-Star. It's very similar, I think, to the championship race. I think the All-Star race every year needs to be rotated to new locations. I've been wanting this done for a very, very long time, for many, many years. And we were getting somewhat of a rotation. In 2020, we went to Bristol. But in 2021, we went to Texas. But for whatever reason, decided to bring it back this year. And I know they want to bring it back to Texas Motor Speedway in 2023, which means, unfortunately, more likely you probably get 2 points paying races, unless there's a way that you only get 1 points paying race at Texas. I think it really just, one of the big reasons is also I don't want to race at Texas Motor Speedway anymore. The less we can race at that track, the better. The fact that the next gen car cannot race at Texas Motor Speedway as well, despite the next gen car succeeding every other mile-and-a-half track on pretty much every other track besides Martinsville, is ridiculous. It's just ridiculous that you can't race Goodyear at Texas Motor Speedway, and the track is basically a lost cause at this point. Now, going back to the story around the All-Stars, where would I like to see the All-Stars raced at? Well, I like to see maybe North Wilkesboro get an opportunity to get the All-Stars. It wouldn't be next year, but I love North Wilkesboro to get an opportunity. What about the National Fairgrounds? I know the National Fairgrounds, I'd like to see them get back. If they can get a deal done, why not have the Cup Series race at the National Fairgrounds? I know basically probably a lot of people wouldn't show up. Probably not like 30 or 40,000 people show up. Maybe more than Texas Motor Speedway's attendance would. So why not bring it there? What about maybe Bowman Gray somehow? I know that probably is a little bit of a stretch because there wouldn't be a lot of room, but Bowman Gray is very similar to LA Coliseum. And I know a lot of fans are clamoring for a race at Bowman Gray Stadium and all the chaos and all the fighting. We've seen over the years tons of fights happen, whether it's from the ARCA, basically the K&N East days back in the day, or basically when the local short track scene. It doesn't matter. Bowman Gray brings out a lot of the chaos and the craziness for sure, and I would absolutely love to basically see them come here. I think it's great that they're looking at rotating the All-Stars. I think maybe inside a stadium, maybe bring a stadium concept around. Who really knows? But I love the fact that Fox is trying to rotate the All-Star race. I think it makes a ton of sense, and hopefully they do go ahead over this, because I'd like to see just get away from Texas Motor Speedway. But in all seriousness, in all honesty, I think this is a really, really good move that they're wanting to rotate the All-Star race. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. As it was announced on Friday afternoon that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. has signed a multi-year contract extension with JTG-Daugherty Racing and will be with JTG-Daugherty Racing for many years to come. Now, we know he'll be with the team through 2023 and 2024. My estimation is that at least is a 3 to 4 year deal. So he'll probably be with the team through 2025 and 2026, which means he'll be around 35 or 36 years old. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who currently drives a 47 car for JTG-Daugherty Racing, has 2 career NASCAR Cup Series victories up to this point, and generally has made JTG-Daugherty Racing a very solid organization. He's had some top 5s and top 10s, and just last year, he was actually competing for a NASCAR Cup Series playoff spot. So he knows how to get it done behind the wheel. Now, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., I think, is a very underrated driver. I know that basically a lot of people give him crap and call him Wrecky Spinhouse, but that's because he was driving for basically Jack Roush's Roush RFK Racing. And let's be honest, RFK in 2018 and stuff, he's the only guy who's been able to win races. I don't care if it's Super Speedway. He's the only guy who's been able to win races and was somewhat contending for playoff spots based on a year-by-year basis. While even Gray Biffle was struggling at points, And, of course, Trevor Bayne was struggling at points as well with the team. I think Stenhouse going back at the team makes a lot of sense. Now, one thing to note also is basically did not note it manufacturers. Now, there's been some ramblings over the years that there's been some teams that have been wanting to switch manufacturers. And it was rumored at one point that JT-Daugherty Racing was maybe going to switch back to Toyota as early as this year, but that never really came to fruition. They basically had a Toyota on the side of their car on the entries when it came to that. But basically, they switched that back basically to Chevy and started running Chevys. Now, I would love to see JT-Daugherty go back to Toyota. They actually do have picker members that do come from Joe Gibbs Racing, I believe still to this day, that come from Joe Gibbs Racing over to JTG-Daugherty Racing. And they used to be a Toyota team back in the mid-2010s. They were a Toyota team from 2009, I believe, up until 2013, before switching to Chevy in 2014 and getting a partnership with RCR. And I think Toyota really is clamoring for getting new blood and new teams. I would love to see it. I'd love to see Ricky Stenhouse Jr. come back to the team. I think it's good. I'm really excited to see that he's absolutely coming back to JT-Daugherty Racing, though. He's a solid driver, and I think he's going to be able to do a really awesome job with this team. So, congratulations to Stenhouse on getting an opportunity to return to JT-Daugherty Racing. I think he's going to win races with this team in the future. And they had that stretch of top 10s recently, which I think is really the big reason why he got kept with the team, because he's capable enough to get top 10s and top 5s with the team. And he's sitting around 23rd or 24th in the points, which is really what you can ask for a team like JTG-Daugherty Racing to be a decent team. They've shown pace at points this year, top 10 speed. They've had a lot of bad luck, but I'm excited, definitely happy to see that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is coming back to JT-Daugherty Racing in 2023. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode as we're talking about Martin Truex Jr. Remember we all thought that Martin Truex Jr. was going to retire from the NASCAR Cup Series in 2023? Well, we were all absolutely wrong. Martin Truex Jr. basically revealed to the media that he is going to return to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2023. The statement revealed, "I'm back," in 2 or 3 words. Absolutely love this, and I'll tell you, I'm really shocked that Martin Truex Jr. is coming back to Joe Gibbs Racing, because over the last month or so, we all really thought that Martin Truex Jr. was going to retire from the NASCAR Cup Series and was going basically not going to be racing after the season. But I'm very happy to see that Martin Truex Jr. is coming back to Joe Gibbs Racing. Yes, Martin Truex Jr. this year has not been as good, but Martin Truex Jr. has generally had a decent year so far. He currently sits 7th in the regular season points at the moment. He just got passed by Kyle Larson in the regular season points. And he's still a driver that has been at points contending for victories. He did have speed at Nashville. Unfortunately, some bad luck near the end of the race kind of cost him an opportunity and a shot at winning the race. But he did get a lot of stage points and got 2 stage wins as well in the race and didn't lose a ton of points and a lot of ground on the championship lead as well, and is still technically in it. I think he's around 70 points back, but he's still technically could really go on a hot streak and do it. And what I think this really making decision, what it's going to help Martin Truex Jr. do, is going to help him be able to go out there and focus on being extremely successful and being a really good driver at the team. I think MTJ coming back makes sense. And I know people really thought he was going to retire, so a guy like Ty Gibbs could come into play, and a guy like John Hunter. And I thought John Hunter was going to take over the 19, or even Tyler Reddick maybe was going to go into the 19 as well. But that's not coming to fruition. So what does this mean for silly season going forward? Well, I think this means that silly season generally, because a lot of analysis has been happening, I think silly season isn't going to be as crazy as we've seen in the past. We've had a couple years where silly season has been crazy. This year, I don't expect as much. Now, there's probably going to be a couple big teams. There's probably going to be some announcement out there. There's always something huge that does happen, but it's probably going to be more of a status quo silly season going forward. Getting back in the story, getting back into Martin Truex Jr., talking about Martin Truex Jr. a little bit more. Martin Truex Jr. still has some tank in the pipe. And I think what the thing is, would 2023 be the last year for Martin Truex Jr.? I think it's going to be the last year for MTJ, and I'll explain why I think that 2023 is going to be the last year for Martin Truex Jr. Martin Truex Jr. today just turned 42 years old. It's his 42nd birthday today. And Martin Truex Jr. at the end of next year is going to be 43 years old. And he's been in the Cup Series now for almost 20 years. Yes, I think he's going to have those ambitions to jump up. But the only way I see him returning in 2024 if he goes to a team like Junior Motorsports perhaps, or to another organization. Here's why. There's a young driver named Ty Gibbs. I think Ty Gibbs more than likely is going to be in the 19 car in 2024, and I think they're going to switch the number to 54. There's a reason why Ty Gibbs is not jumping up the Cup next year and why he's going back to the NASCAR Xfinity Series next year to get more experience and mature as a driver. Ty Gibbs has not shown that enough maturity, in my opinion, to jump up to the Cup Series at this moment. And I don't think that maturity really will come through. And I think he is going to struggle a lot, which is why I think he's staying in the Xfinity Series and why he's not jumping up to the Cup Series and why Mark Truex Jr. is coming back in 2023 as well. But I think unless he goes to another team, Mark Truex Jr. goes to another team, I think next year will be the last year for Mark Truex Jr. But same token, same time, which the team will talk about in a little bit, he'd be a great option if they decide to ever go full-time in the future. But I'm excited to see Mark Truex Jr. is coming back next year. I think he'll be a championship contender and be more of a threat than he's been this year. I think he'll absolutely will be a championship contender. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final, and I repeat, final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. Now, Junior Motorsports, once again, has been in the news regarding a potential Cup Series opportunity for 2023 over the last couple days. It all started off this past week on the live Dale Jr. download in Nashville. Well, Dale Jr. revealed that he says that Junior Motorsports is still wanting to go to the Cup Series and has been working on it over the last 12 months. And as recently as yesterday, Kelly Earnhardt was on SiriusXM NASCAR radio discussing this. There's a lot of things that she said, but she said that the team really right now is focusing on basically having some things done for 2023, trying to get their drivers re-signed. They have a lot of things that they're currently focusing on. She did say that they are not looking to jump up full-time to the Cup Series in 2023, but she does say that there's a big possibility that Junior Motorsports could jump up at least on a couple one-off starts in the season, maybe a couple starts in 2023. We might see Junior Motorsports in the Cup Series, guys, in 2023, and I think that's absolutely huge. Now, a lot of people are asking why are they not looking to go full-time. I'm going to explain to a lot of people why this is the case. There's a couple reasons why I believe. One, Rick Hendrick is part of the ownership group of Junior Motorsports, and Rick Hendrick would have to drop his name off. Now, it does not mean that Hendrick Motorsports would stop basically giving them the engines that they need. I think Rick would still help them out. It's Dale Jr., come on. But I think that means that Rick would have to drop his name off the ownership group because Rick Hendrick is part of the ownership group. The other big reason, this is actually, I think, the number one massive reason. One reason is charters. Charter money, ladies and gentlemen, how much charter costs right now has gone up exponentially. According to Adam Stern from a couple months ago, $15 million right now is what the number on the charter money is currently. So a charter right now costs around $15 million at the moment, which is why a team like Nice Motorsports, who's going after a charter currently as well, that's why we haven't seen a new team or new blood really come in yet, and why it's hard to get in the Cup Series. And the only way that a guy like Junior Motorsports or Dale Jr.'s team is going to jump up on a full-time basis right now is because of that. And a lot of people ask, well, why couldn't Junior Motorsports just go full-time without having that charter? The big reason is basically because the unchartered teams, the open teams, don't get much money. Before 2021, they got 15% of what a charter team got, so there still was a little bit of revenue that they got. But now they only get 1% of the revenue from the race. I don't know if they get a full percentage, to be honest. I don't remember if they even get a full percent. So you have to think about that. That's probably the reason why, which is basically think about this. AJ Allmendinger won in Colleague Racing last year at Indianapolis Road Course. They got 30th place earnings. Basically what Rick Ware got. They got that earnings. So they lost money in the race. And Denny Hamlin said this too on the Dale Jr. Download. That you lose revenue and you don't basically make money back. And that's why a lot of these teams are clamoring for charters. And a lot of people ask, why couldn't they just add charters at the moment? Well, one, they got to expand the fields. But two, they're not planning to until a new manufacturer comes in. Now, of course, new manufacturer is being rumored for 2025 or 2024 for that matter. But we'll have to wait and see there. But talking about Junior Motorsports potentially going back to the Cup Series once again, I think it needs to happen. I think Dale Jr.'s team being in the Cup Series field makes a lot of sense. Now, ultimately, now going to potential drivers going forward, do you think, first thing, do you think they'll go full-time? Do I think they'll go full-time in 2024? Probably. I think there's a good chance they will in 2024. But I think they got to get their drivers re-signed for 2023. But I think if they're going to make the jump up to the Cup Series next, or at least on a part-time basis, Josh Berry needs to be the driver. Josh Berry's had Cup Series experience. Josh wants to go to the Cup Series, and I think he absolutely deserves the opportunity too. I think Junior Motorsports would provide a great opportunity for that. So I am excited to see it. Don't get me wrong. I want to see Junior Motorsports in the Cup Series as much as everyone does. I think they need to be in the Cup Series. It's another team that's involved in the sport. The more teams you get on the entry list every single year, the better it's going to be. And I think especially if they're bringing their cars to Daytona 500, which they've always been good on super speedways in the Xfinity Series, and I can work with Hendrick Motorsports as well to really help their team out as well. But I'm excited to see what happens. I hope that Junior Motorsports makes a jump up the Cup in 2023, at least on a part-time basis. It's exciting for sure. We got some new teams and new blood trying to get in. We know Nice is trying to get in, and we now know that Junior Motorsports is trying to get in as well. So, anyway, that is it for today's long NASCAR and Motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notification on to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on page and all the list schedule below that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. Do you think that Junior Motorsports will enter the Cup Series field or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Mark Truex Jr. returning to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2023? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, more than likely, will be a NASCAR updated 2023 NASCAR silly season predictions video. And then on Friday, will either be a NASCAR news video or it will be something else. I'll figure it out as we get through the weeks. But anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. And I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.